everyone. I'm Harpreet Singh, welcoming you to the Future of Work Pioneers podcast. Today, we are speaking with Elizabeth Bramson-Boudreau, the Chief Executive Officer and Publisher of MIT Technology Review. Elizabeth leads the growth, expansion, and modernization of the review's media platforms and products. Elizabeth also serves as the Chairman and President of MIT Enterprise Forum, a nonprofit organization of the chapters worldwide. Prior to this role, Elizabeth was the global managing director of the Economist Corporate Network. Elizabeth, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
You've had an exciting career. Can you tell us more about your background and any defining moments that have shaped your career?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you. It's great to be here, and it's nice to be asked about. Everyone likes to talk about themselves. I have had an interesting career. I've taken a number of different paths because of my interests growing and expanding as I learned about media, as I learned about technology. I also took a time early in my career, about 10, 15 years ago, to mostly be at home to take care of two babies who are now teenagers. I took a bit of a side step, or I worked as a consultant on a freelance basis for about 3 years. So I have had quite a few iterations. I think, a defining moment for me, when I returned to, the work world, I went to the Economist. I was living in the UK at the time in London in around 2010. And I took on a position, kind of a corporate strategy role. Long story as to how I got there, but I had had experience with that organization before in my career. And I remember I was trying to sort of figure out sort of where was my career going to take me next, and sort of where were my ambitions within media. And I remember my manager, my boss at the time, saying to me, how much when he hired me, how much he really valued my ambition. And I think that hearing that was a bit surprising. I don't think anyone had ever seen that and told me they liked it. And it was this sort of sense of giving me the permission to let it show that left me feeling like just extremely energized and sort of ready to tackle what was next. And that was very shortly thereafter that I decided what I actually wanted to be doing was running a media company. And so, one thing led to another, and here I am.
So how did you end up at the Technology Review?
Yeah, so we were in London for 6 years, and had gone there for my husband he did his PhD at MIT, and we went. He's a business school professor. And we went a couple different places before we decided to return to the U.S. In order for him to sort of take the next step in his academic career. And as you probably know, academia is it's a little different from other industries in that there aren't that many places one can live, and certainly the Boston area is one of them. And it was coming back home. We had been here when he was doing his PhD. My family's here, so we decided to come back to the U.S. And I tried to decide, did I want to stay in media? There's not a lot of media in the Boston area, or did I want to do other things? When the opportunity at MIT Technology Review came up to me, and it just seemed so intriguing. At that point in time, MIT had taken a decision probably a year prior to engage in a expansion and growth strategy around that brand, the business, and they needed some, executive leadership, which is how I came to introduce myself to them, and ended up there.
That's great. So there is an ongoing surge of media consumption since the pandemic began, with people around the globe trying to stay updated on the crisis, on the impacts of the crisis. So how do you see the consumption of information changing in this context? And has the role of technology changed? And also, I see that there is a rise of intermediaries that are trying to personalize news, like Apple News.
Mhm.
Uh, so how do you see this ecosystem evolving?
Well, it is it is an ecosystem that is evolving quickly and has changed quite a bit since, I've been certainly since I've been in this role, but of course you look longer, 10 years back, let's say, it's tremendously different than what it once was. And it's an industry that's, because of the disintermediation and in the existence of platforms, be they Apple News, like you mentioned, or Facebook, or Twitter, other ways that people experience or come upon content, has been quite challenging for media companies. But just to talk about the pandemic quickly, because I think it's an interesting case example. So back in March, when everything kind of exploded in terms of the realization that we were in a pandemic, there was a massive spike that we experienced, and a lot of other media brands besides experienced, in our traffic. I mean, it just went from kind of where we had been steadily rising to spiking up 2.5 times, because everybody, I'm sure you included, was at home thinking, what the heck is going on? I need to get content, I need to get information, I need to know what's new. And I mean, you probably remember those days. We were just constantly reading, what is this? Where is this going to end? What does it really mean? Am I in danger? Are we going to run out of, toilet paper? All of that, right? And then once, sort of April and May came, things started to fall back. And I think for media companies like MIT Technology Review, the challenge then shifted to being, what is our story? What is our way of understanding what's going on in this crisis moment? And how can we help our readers understand it from the lens of the insights that we have from biomedicine and the developments of the mRNA vaccines, for instance? And how can we help people understand what they should be bearing in mind? So we've then sort of adapted our approach. We were, like everybody else back in March, writing everything. And then it became everyone's competing for the same story. So we really needed to think more strategically. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a real, microcosm, or that's an episodic example of what's happened in media. If you are able to, scroll Twitter and then click on stories here, there, and anywhere, instead of what we once did, was you'd go to a website, and you probably remember you would go to HuffingtonPost.com or WallStreetJournal.com. You don't do that so much anymore. You discover the stories in various other ways. It's therefore all the more important is if you see the stories published by the Times, by the New Yorker, by whoever, why are you going to pick MIT Tech Review? We need to be sure that's always clear. And that's really where we lean hard on what makes us special and unique, which is our connection to the ecosystem that MIT sits at the center of.
So staying with this context of social platforms, other intermediaries being the channels for these periodicals or news sites, how does the business model evolve in that context? I'm sure you've had to innovate on your business model. What are some of the considerations you've had about implementing paywalls or subscriptions? Because if I can subscribe to Apple News, or I'm going to get it there anyhow, or or do I really want to subscribe to one single publication? Mm-hmm. How do you think about those kind of challenges?
Well, it's to be very honest with you, I think it's an evolving strategy, as good strategy should be, right? The way we think about it today, specifically to Apple News, for instance, we have a certain set of our stories that we will publish that anyone can read and kind of stumble upon on Apple News. And then we also have some that if you see it, you can't actually read it. You can see that it's there, you know what it's about. Maybe you see just a stump of it, but then you have to come back to our site to actually read it, where we will serve you with a couple of stories until you encounter our paywall. Like most good media companies today, we are trying to drive people to become subscribers. We believe you should pay for content. You always did pay for content back in the days of print. This idea that content is free that came with the internet, I think we know that it's not quite so free now that we understand a little bit better the way we've paid as a eyeball for an advertiser, or maybe you could argue societally. So what we have to then do is give you a reason to choose MIT Technology Review, because we know that you're going to get tired of all the subscriptions. We know there's a limit to how many subscriptions any sensible person is going to have. So again, we need to think really smartly about what is it about what we do that is unique and valuable. And again, we think that's about really good insights into the technology, where it's coming from, what it's going to do, where it's going next, how it could have an impact across the way you work, the way you live, a society as a whole. And that's something that we feel we have authority and credibility and real insight to talk about because of our team, which is people who come to work for us and with us because they value those insights, because they want to be in conversations with MIT scholars or scholars at sort of MIT level institutions, private sector, et cetera, and know that they can bring that to life in the journalism we create.
Does a print version still have currency? And not just your periodical, what I'm talking generally, right? I mean, does anyone still read a print version of a periodical?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And here's the way we think about print. So first of all, one of the things we did about 3.5, 4 years ago was we changed the way we thought about our print magazine. Rather than print being whatever was published on the web being put into a print format, we moved to a thematic approach. So each of our print issues, it has a single theme. So we've done the AI issue, we did the China issue, we just did an issue that's our new issue now is called the Progress issue. Anything that we did the last issue before that was the food issue, all about innovations in food technology and supply chains, et cetera. So we tackle a topic and look at it from kind of all directions in print. And the thinking behind that is that the constant flow of the news cycle is much better suited to digital. But to concentrate on an entire topic, there's something much more immersive about that, something that really does lend itself nicely to sitting back in the chair with a cup of tea next to you and reading like we did, right, once upon a time. You wouldn't really want to do that with a bunch of news articles today because they would have been you would have lost the moment that out of which they were born. So we think that having the two as a complement to one another is actually the best way forward. We are seeing that in the commercial results, that when people become subscribers to Technology Review, although they can choose to be a they can choose to be a digital-only subscriber, or they can be a print plus digital subscriber. They can no longer be a print-only subscriber. But if they choose to, they can choose between digital only or print plus digital. More of them are choosing print plus digital. And I think there is a value that's understood there, that having the two together is really quite compelling. How many people, when they have that issue in their hands, read the article there versus on their screens? I can't say. Personally, by the time I get my print copy of MIT Technology Review, I have already read those stories in the digital format of that magazine issue. But maybe I'm impatient. Maybe I don't sit down in an armchair with a cup of tea enough. I think it depends on one's life. I think there's all kinds of usage habits according to age and lifestyle, et cetera, that probably that probably are insignificant in that. But for the foreseeable future, we will continue to do both because we see value there.
It makes a lot of sense. I think that the thematic approach does have a lot of value.
Yeah.
So thanks to the political discourse in this country, even our most credible media has been under attack. There's a lot of misinformation about so-called fake news, biases, and other media myths that impact the media's credibility today. So how do you operate in this kind of environment, and what steps are you taking to maintain the trust of your readers?
Yes, it's a really timely, important question. I think the best answer I can give you is to tell you kind of the way that the editorial team operates. So they are, dedicated tech and science journalists who have spent, who have come to technology review having built careers elsewhere. We certainly do have junior journalists, but generally speaking, that our journalist team, this is not their first journalist job most of the time. So they developed a reputation for excellence elsewhere. And they are constantly in consultation with people who are experts in whatever that particular article topic is about, either people that they interview and quote, or people that they kind of seek counsel from. And that, again, that's a place where the MIT relationships become very, very useful. So what we're trying to do is do objective reporting and about a technology and the potential outcomes that technology can have on society, even inconvenient truths. And what we're trying to do as a brand, or I would say as a platform, is to foster conversation. So to say, this is what we believe is going to be the impact of the mRNA vaccine technique across not only the COVID-19 virus vaccines, but the fighting and the challenging of diseases of all sorts. We think and here's why we think that. But we're very interested in framing the conversation in a way that people can debate, informed people can debate based upon good research and good reporting. So I think that the whole kind of, the whole rationale around, or sort of the motivation perhaps around MIT Technology Review is that, it used to be once upon a time, not that long ago, that it was like technology is going to save the world. It's going to be so great. Everything's going to be awesome. And it was lots of techno optimism and lots of Silicon Valley adulation you would read in journalism. I think we are firmly of the belief that it is not necessarily the case that those things will occur, that technology will make a better world. I mean, certainly you can look at the last, 4 or 5 years and you can say, well, golly, that didn't happen. Things are kind of rough right now. If you're sick, or someone you care about has gotten sick from this virus, if you're concerned about fires or freezes in extreme weather events, if you're concerned about misinformation and the problems of corrupt elections anywhere, not just in the United States but around the world, you can understand that's no longer the case, that this accepted truth about technology that's automatically going to be for the good. And so what we're trying to do is really call those sort of assumptions and the powerful people behind them, call the question, and get the conversation going so that we can make smarter decisions as a society. I think, the general, I don't think we think that people are bad. Everyone wants to have a good world. So let's be sure we're thinking intelligently about how to make sure we do so.
This episode is brought to you by Experfy. Incubated in Harvard Innovation Lab, Experfy provides custom future of work solutions, such as private talent clouds and skill taxonomies. Experfy differentiates itself by using subject matter experts to pre-vet and pipeline candidates for AI and high-end technology skills. However, Experfy Talent Cloud Platform is skill agnostic and can be licensed to build custom talent clouds for any and all skills. In a different use case, enterprises interested in employee intermobility can license the Experfy platform to create an internal gigs marketplace where interested employees can be algorithmically matched to projects, gamifying their learning experience. Visit www.experfy.com for more information.
What does the media landscape look like in the next 3 to 5 years? You see AI and algorithms becoming major producers and curators of news in the future?
Major, I would say no. Minor, I would say yes. I think it's already happening. You have certain places where structured data things about financial markets or sports or other things like that, you're already seeing those AI created content there. But in terms of really important, insightful articles and journalistic reported stories, I don't think so. I don't see that for the foreseeable future. I will say, though, that in terms of the sort of competitive landscape, I think there's a big shakeup that we've already been through, and there's more to come there.
Can you talk about that shakeup? What have you seen?
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, as I kind of alluded to earlier, this idea that there is a fatigue or there's an expectation that there will be a fatigue amongst consumers who aren't going to want to have a huge number of subscriptions, digital and print or whatever, to media outlets. I do think that more and more you will see the large publishers like the New York Times, the Washington Post, Bloomberg, you will see them become more and more dominant because they will begin to build out coverage in a whole bunch of different topics. So, it used to be the New York Times would cover business and there might be a slight couple of technology articles in the business section, right? Now they have a full-fledged tech team. I think they'll build that out as tech continues to, build out. I think, the same is true of other places like the Wall Street Journal. The Wall Street Journal's developed quite a big arts and lifestyle. And I think these companies will continue to try to build it so that when you take a decision about what you want in your subscription to your home, you for sure start with one of those guys. And I think that's going to be problematic for people like Technology Review, who are the tech-only titles, because maybe I get as much as I need from the New York Times. Maybe I don't need any more. And therefore, it's all the more important for MIT Technology Review to figure out how to position our content and how to really dig deeper into what you cannot get from the New York Times. And that's really about the kind of the deep tech and the hard tech, and the understanding of what's coming out of labs, what's being developed in R&D centers, which isn't the kind of reporting that, at least at this point, and I probably won't ever be the kind of reporting that the New York Times will lean in on.
Tell us about a day in the life of a CEO of a major publication. And has that role evolved since the time you've been working in the field?
Yeah, I think it has. It's quite interesting because certainly the day in the life of a CEO of a company like MIT Technology Review looks different today than it did 1 year ago today, and as it does for you as well, and many other people besides. So this is my office. This is also an extra bedroom in my home. And, I no longer go into the office and have that whole experience that I miss very much. We're on Zoom, etc. But in terms of even pre-pandemic and of course through the pandemic, how the role has changed. I mean, we've been spending a lot of time over this digital transformation that is, we are about 3+ years into. Trying to deeply understand our audience in a way that I think wasn't necessary a decade ago. So when you're largely serving people through a print product, you kind of create it and send it out, right? You don't know who's reading what. You don't know how much time they spent on this article versus that article. We have a lot more insight, and therefore, it's a lot more work to dig through how much time did you spend on that article, or which ones did you not read at all, out of a collection of articles, for example. Or once you read that article, did you leave us, or did you continue to read across a whole bunch of different topics, or did you go more deeply down the AI path or the robotics or the biomedicine or whatever it might be? And what does that tell us about you? Similarly, when you came to us, did you come to us through one of our newsletters or through social media? So there's a lot more that allows us to be more strategic and deliberate about how we find more readers and how we keep the readers happy, and what kind of products we expand with and so forth. We didn't do podcasts, We only started podcasts about 2 years ago. We have a fantastic set of podcasts today, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, it is a much more, I would say it's a more interesting job. But I can't, I'm sure there's elements of the previous way of doing things that, that I would have enjoyed too.
You mentioned having to understand your audience. So tell us about your audience and the ways in which you're serving that audience.
So we have an audience of people that numbers about 4.5 to 5 million per month that come to our site. Again, they come from a bunch of different places. They come to us directly because they know our brand, and that's a bit unique because we have the MIT name. It's a bit unique in media, they come to us because they subscribe to one of our email newsletters that shows up in their email box, or through social media, or they may get referred to us by maybe referral traffic that comes from another media company that links to an article that we've written or so, and so comes and reads us. So our digital audience is quite large, and in general is in that really lovely spot of about 25 to 45 years of age. They are technology interested, of course. They are upwardly mobile, as you can see from kind of their age and their income level, because we have some good analytics that tells us that. And generally speaking, they're coming to us because they're looking for really good insights into where these emerging technologies are going. And that's a part of a belief that tech is a part of their professional futures. Now, our print audience is older. And that's consistent, again, across media companies. Our print audience is around the 45 to 65 years of age. So folks who have achieved a little bit more in their career by virtue of age and, et cetera, and have a larger household income and more business responsibility and so forth. So what's interesting for us is how we can try to serve them differently with different products. And so that's what we're spending a lot of time thinking about, is how to enhance the products that we can direct at those two general types of readers.
And when it comes to prioritizing content, categorizing content, what are the kind of things that go, or what are the considerations that that go into doing that? So is it what I'm really getting at is it based on customer interest, or is it based on your own mission? How are you thinking about that?
Yeah, so I think for us, when we because when we publish our content, generally speaking, we publish it across all of our platforms. So there'll be let's say we write a story about a particular, a story about a particular technology. We will release it across all of our platforms, except perhaps print, as I mentioned earlier. But there will be variations in how we release it. So, for example, if we want to release it on Twitter, we might do, if it's a long story that merits this, we might do a thread, do a Twitter thread that kind of teases out some of the big insights that are found in that article to give people a chance to get a little bit more insight into it before they dive in. Because we also know that threads also get a lot of interest amongst a Twitter audience. Or if it's on Instagram, we'll really showcase the art, the design work that goes into that digital or print story, and we'll make sure that that art is front and center, and it's shown to best use. If it's one of our podcasts, we have a wonderful podcast called In Machines We Trust, where we did recently a real dig into facial recognition and the challenges of facial recognition, problems of facial recognition technology for law enforcement. And that each of those episodes could be an article. So we will share it through our various platforms, but we're driving people to go and actually listen, because that's when you're going to get it at its full, sort of multimedia experience. So we're thinking about where we're going to find the audience, and what mode that individual will be in when he or she is on Twitter versus Instagram versus podcasts versus on their desktop versus laptop with mobile. We're thinking about the way that that person's going to be living their life, and we're trying to make it as easy for them to get engaged with it.
So you are grappling with a wide range of topics, societal, political, commercial impacts of technology, seeing how technology is evolving. What are the trends that you see that would impact societies from a macro perspective in the future?
Oh, yeah. Well, so you happen to ask me that question in the right week, actually, because earlier this week, we released MIT Technology Review every year for the last 20 years has done an annual list of the 10 breakthrough technologies, the 10 technologies that we think are going to have the greatest impact in our lives. And so you can go back over the 10 years, or excuse me, the 20 years, and you can see, what we got right, what we didn't get right. And it's been very, very interesting because it's the 20th year, we did do a bit of an essay kind of analyzing the last 20 years. But this year's list, there's 10 of them, and I'm not going to be the best person to explain all 10. But there are 3 that I think are really interesting that I might name here. 2 of them really involve how artificial intelligence is emerging or is evolving. One of them is GPT-3, which is the ability of AI to transform linguistic text, create linguistic text by pulling together a whole bunch of linguistic text from any number of different sources, kind of like a scrapbook, and it can really fool humans into thinking it's actually a human being creating these pieces of text. So it's going to be very transformative in doing things like responding to customer service queries, but also it can do coding and things like that. Like other technologies and AI use cases, it has a potential dark side that has to be watched carefully. There was an example of this particular technology being released in a bot on Reddit, and it was, giving advice, psychological advice to people. It happened to be decent advice, but even so, you have to be careful, right? Because it's sort of garbage in, garbage out. If you don't have someone kind of monitoring and being smart about how the algorithm develops. So I think there's a lot of attention going into that. I don't mean to suggest there isn't, but we do see the technology as being, potentially highly impactful. Another one is also the AI related, and it's the combination of different modes of artificial intelligence. So both linguistic and sensory being able to work together, whereas previously, you could go way down a path on one or the other of those, but bringing them together will enable, better robotics, robotics that can respond to environmental stresses like wind, a windy day or a sunny day or a rainy day or whatever. This idea that, that the input of the data could be taken from a bunch of different ways, not only one mode or another. Again, super transformative. I think, again, all around AI, we're spending a lot of journalistic energy looking at the potential darker sides. So I don't mean to sound like I'm like, oh, it's all going to be great. I think it is clearly an evolution towards things that could be wonderful and need to be thought about in a considered way. And then I think a third one is the development of battery technologies, lithium metal battery technologies that can be transformative or will be transformative because they have a much larger battery range. So the challenge with battery technologies on electric vehicles now is that the range isn't that far. So you can go like 250 miles on your car. So this lithium metal battery technology, which I certainly can't explain to you, but I did read the article that we just published on it. But it will expand that life from about, again, 250 miles to like 450 miles. So you could really imagine being able to go much longer distances. And if we see that roll out across the electric vehicle industry, we really will be talking about being able to do a lot more replacement of fossil fuel, driven vehicles, gasoline.
That's fascinating.
Diesel. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exciting. I mean, these are the kinds of things that I don't know about them until I read them in MIT Tech Review. And it's, I'm very lucky.
Any parting words for our audience?
I would say, and I often say this to people who don't necessarily know the ins and outs of media. Like most people, read articles here and there, have a few subscriptions. I mean, I think, I guess my final parting word would be, please, whatever your media choices, whether you want to work, whether you want to read MIT Technology Review or someone else, it's fine. But please pay for your media, support journalism. I think the world we live in will only be better if we have a functioning journalistic media industry. And that requires that we no longer think of content as something that I should get for free on the internet, because you're going to get free content. It's not going to be good content. The stuff you pay for is, has to pay salaries of writers and editors. So I guess that my final parting words would be to please pay for content.
No, that I totally endorse what you're saying. Very, very important to support journalistic activity.
Absolutely. I think that's the world we want to live in.
Well, thank you, Elizabeth. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you. Likewise. I appreciate it.